There are approximately 4,550 satellites orbiting our planet on any given day. Throughout the year, almost 100 tons of space metal crashes to our Earth, often never recovered. Some have worried that this sheer amount of junk that is slowly rotating around our planet will one day be a threat to our planet due to the continuous collisions of debris with one another. This is why we often need to collect the data from the crash sites to determine the cause of the collision. Often, they are equipped with data boxes that are meant to survive re-entry. True, that isn't always possible, and there are a lot of factors involved that make every crash different. This is likely what was running through my head when I was informed a research satellite had crashed over the Gobi Desert. I considered it no different than the dozens of others we had retrieved in recent years. Unfortunately, I knew as soon as I discovered the likely location that getting there would not be easy. The Chinese and Mongolian military aren't exactly friendly when it comes to any allies coming over their land, no matter what the reason is. This is why we had to be discreet, and we hired mercenaries, guns for hire that could conjure up a story about their whereabouts if they got caught, and would do anything for a quick buck with few questions asked. My task was to be their official rep from the company, and when I met the group, I admit I had my doubts about their efficiency. There were 7 of them altogether from different Euro backgrounds and 1 American, all of them with rap sheets longer than I felt comfortable with. But I didn't want to seem intimidated by 4 men and 3 women when I had been doing this for longer than some of them had been alive. So I decided to focus on the mission. The trajectory of the crash told us that the majority of the debris fell near the Mongolian border. It's likely the data box is in that area too, somewhere near these cliffs. I paused as I briefed them. Part of me felt angry they didn't seem to be concerned with the details, but I suppose this was still considered a routine grab and bag. We had no indication there was anything out of the ordinary. We will be under the guise of a tour group leaving out of Ulaanbaatar first thing in the morning toward the northern parts of the desert. The caravan will be crossing over several border patrols to the Imak Umenoguve. From there, we will find a way to depart into the deeper central nexus of the desert. The plan is twofold. Part of the group will remain with the caravan until they reach the Chinese border and report any further information pertaining to possible secondary sites. And the main group will head west. That terrain is more dangerous and arid and not as easily explored, but it will likely yield results. And before you ask how we break free from the caravan, we will contact a local Tibetan guide that is experienced in the camel trails. That will be the only way our presence can remain undetected. I told them. I went on to explain what to do if in the off chance they were questioned by authorities and what story to tell them. But once again, it felt like they weren't really paying attention. Then I provided them with false papers and documents to mirror the story of our vacation to the Gobi before making sure that I had my own. Despite the tension I felt, I was sure that the retrieval would be over within the amount of 48 hours. But I should have been the one to ask more questions. 7 hours later, I was boarding a corporate flight to the east, trying to remain calm and self-assured that I would make it home. On the way, a call from our chief analyst reminded me what this was all about. I'm going to be sending you some information that relates to the last few transmissions from the satellite. See if you can match them with the data you have on your search area. He told me. I waited for the downloads and pulled the images up side by side. Are they at different angles? I asked. They looked like completely different areas of the desert. As I'm sure you know, we have been monitoring electromagnetic activity all across Asia with these satellites for some time. I'm going to send a separate reading that provides further detail about the image you just received. The analyst told me. The second reading looked like geological scans detailing shifts in the Earth itself. And from what I was gathering, it showed a trail where something massive had moved beneath the desert surface. I must be seeing things, I said as I realized the signature of one of the larger rock formations appeared to have distinctly changed from the 2 images. What you are seeing is the latest imagery from the satellite, almost 72 hours ago. We had focused on the reading due to its unusual activity. The mountain, as you can see, appears to have moved across the desert. He told me. And then the satellite crashed? I asked. No, not until we attempted to triangulate the data with some of our findings from Afghan provinces. The analyst told me. I sat back and rubbed my forehead tiredly, not fully grasping what he was saying. So the satellite was sending some kind of frequency to the mountain to scan it, and then just blacked out? I asked. That's the running theory. We will know more once the box is back in our custody. My boss told me. Sounds fun. Do we think this has anything to do at all with the Atlantic event? I asked. That's why you're there. Remember, Taggart? Find out what you can and keep us in the loop. Now head out. I felt suddenly overwhelmed with a sense of purpose that I didn't understand, but wanted to learn more. I was slightly excited to learn this wouldn't be a routine retrieval, and my mind started to ponder what other secrets this expedition would reveal. Little did I realize what our search would unleash. The capital of Mongolia looked like it was being swallowed up by a wasteland on all sides, a metropolitan dreamlike fantasy land that was separate from the harsh realities of the desert. My crew landed before I did and had booked a small hotel in the east part of the town. To match our low poverty profile, the leader told me snidely when I arrived. The rest of the caravan wasn't far off. I told them to get ready to move out despite all of the recent travel. You guys work to get paid, so the faster you get this done, the sooner we can go home, I told them. The women didn't seem too happy with the way I was treating them, claiming I was treating them as subhuman. Whatever is out there in the copy can wait till tomorrow. I knew she was right, but I didn't want to show weakness. Their leader made the decision for me, barking for them to wash up, change into civilian gear, and be ready to head out. When we were alone, I thanked the leader. No need. I hate the sand, she told me as she stood outside to look at the sun as it set over the skyscrapers of the Mongolian supercity. Hate to break it to you, love, there's a lot of it where we are headed, I said with a half smile. She crossed her arms, surprised by my dry sense of humor. You seem a bit different from the other thugs that work for the corporation. Are you fresh meat? She asked. Military branding, it's in my blood. I'll just focus on the job and worry about the little details later, I told her. Army? She guessed. 2 generations. I plan to let go once my debts are paid to these corporate thugs. So in other words, never. I joked again. I'm sure you would do fine out there rather than be tied to a chain by bureaucrats. I'm Jacqueline, by the way. Jacqueline Parker. Andrew Taggart, but everyone calls me Tack, I told her as I covered my mouth to stifle a yawn. You sure you want to ship out now? She asked. Trying to see more of my pretty face, I countered. The woman rolled her eyes and said, My turn to wash up. Go check on the caravan. An hour later, we were rolling down the city streets toward one of the guard stations. From there, it would be into the wilderness. We opted to travel in the middle of the caravan to avoid detection, but it didn't make me any less stressed as our counterfeit papers were checked and we moved toward the harsh exterior of Mongolia itself. A 10-hour drive would wait for us to reach the Gobi. Lots of time to turn around. But instead, I found myself thinking of Jacqueline. She seemed smart and had looks to make anyone's head turn. A shame we were both in debt up to our eyeballs. A different world would have been different lives for both of us. Now we were here together on a wild goose chase for a moving mountain. The first sign of trouble came about 7 hours later. The caravan had been constantly on the move, only pausing for bathroom breaks where passengers were told they could use water bottles to relieve themselves. Jacqueline and the other women didn't seem too happy with that solution, so instead, they were told to piss behind a large dune. When we got back on the road again, one of them named Abigail complained about feeling nauseous. Then, a moment later, she was throwing up onto the sands of the dry earth. I motioned for the caravan to stop, which seemed to make the guide frustrated, and we checked to see if she was alright. Must be the heat or something, she admitted. But then about 10 minutes later, others in the group were getting sick as well. And as I was examining their vomit on the ground, I noticed that all of it looked similar in color and substance, thick and brown and foamy, as if all of us had inhaled toxic spores. The guide suggested that we could phone the nearest emergency patrol to bring us medical supplies, but I knew that would take hours and lose precious daylight. Despite how Abby and the other passengers were feeling, the majority of the caravan pressed forward. I succumbed to this strange wave of sickness right as we made it to the Chinese border, and immediately my mind went to radiation poisoning. Could it be that the debris left a trail all across this region? I asked out loud as I tried my best not to vomit again. My head was spinning and I felt weak. I was terrified at the thought that we might end up completely dehydrated out here due to this illness before we even discovered the crash site. Gregor, one of the meteorological experts that had been tracking the patterns of the satellite, admitted he wasn't sure what was causing this, but suspected some form of space debris had likely come down with the satellite. We should contact our headquarters for more equipment before we venture further, he recommended. But we were there at the border, and I saw that our camel guide, Abzul, was already prepared. We couldn't afford to waste the time. Despite the setback of our bodies, we pressed into the desert away from the caravan as the sun began to set. You have come a long way simply for something so small, Abzul commented, as another teammate, Farron, showed a schematic of the satellite so we could get an idea of what we were looking for. It was made of mostly aluminum and other functional materials meant to survive the harshness of space. Ironic that it was often the re-entry to Earth that caused the most damage, I thought. And the black box is made of strong alloy, copper and titanium to prevent damage to the contents. It will look like a briefcase that glistens in the midday sun, Jacqueline told the others. Although to be honest, I realized that daylight was dwindling and our crew was exhausted from the sickness, meaning that setting up camp for the night might be necessary. I consulted Absol to see what materials he brought, and he agreed to pitch 2 tents, one for the men and one for the women. We were settled away from the sweltering sands about an hour later as the sun began to go down. I didn't know it at the time, but that decision would be the first domino in the nightmare that was preparing to swallow us whole. We woke with a startle as a loud rush of air swept overhead, and I tumbled out of my tent to see what made the noise. The sky that had been peaceful a moment earlier was now torn apart by the streak of long thin cloud of fire and smoke that was careening toward the surface. The others came out of their tents, watching in astonishment as the object sped toward the ground, the sound barrier being broken as it thrust itself closer and closer to our planet. Then at last, it struck the ground, a cloud of dust erupting everywhere and pushing the wave of particles toward us. Absol urged all of us to hurry inside, but Gregor and another researcher were too slow, the sudden gusts knocking them down. It was impossible to see what was going on around us, but I heard the 2 scientists suddenly gasping for breath amid the storm. I was tempted to go outside the tent and save them, but Absol held me back, and we listened as the 2 of them struggled for air. Then at last, their gasps came to a stop, and shortly after, dead silence covered the dark desert again. I emerged from the tent to see that Gregor and the other scientist, a woman I never even knew the name of, were now dead. Jacqueline ordered an autopsy as I felt a cold chill run down my spine. That object from the sky had carried a dangerous pathogen, and Farron confirmed my suspicions a moment later when he checked our readings. If I'm not mistaken, we have just been eyewitnesses to the very crash we were supposed to be investigating. The readings are identical, he said, his voice hollow and filled with dread and confusion. I shared his sentiment. Something unnatural had just occurred. How could the satellite be crashing a second time if it had already done so? We were facing an unprecedented event, and our destination was for the heart of this phenomenon. We're less than 6 miles from where it hit the Earth. We need to move now to determine what it is, Jacqueline insisted. We did not even attempt to bury our dead, because as we got back on the camels, Absol observed a sandstorm was beginning to stir across the Gobi. We have maybe an hour of visibility, and then we will have to stop. If we don't move now, we will lose sight of it entirely, he told me. We only wasted a few short moments for Jacqueline to get a result from the bodies, which made me even more uneasy. Their blood was riddled with spores, having suddenly and violently taken hold of their body without remorse. As soon as that object had gone overhead, and they inhaled whatever space toxins were aboard, it was too late for them. Perhaps what disturbed me the most were the similarities this spore had to the brown vomit we had all experienced on the way across the desert. Another impossible scenario. There was no way we should be sharing radiation sickness from a crash that hadn't happened yet. I kept all of these thoughts to myself, focusing instead on the journey ahead as we pushed through a dark valley. The storm grew more intense, and Absol warned us to not stray from his trail. There were places in the desert that he claimed could swallow us whole. We somehow made the 6 miles in about an hour and a half time, with no daylight left when we reached the spot where the satellite had crashed. Jacqueline told us to camp on the ridge and we would investigate in the morning. The small object had made quite an impact on the ground, disrupting a mile radius in all directions and burning up most of the area, turning the sand into hardened crystal as well. Farron chose to do a radiation reading before we went to bed, and I couldn't sleep until I was sure it was safe. Curious. I'm not picking up anything at all, he told me. That's good news, isn't it? I think you misunderstand, my American friend. There is no indication that the satellite is even here. See for yourself, he explained as he pulled up the data. How can that be? I asked. He admitted that he had no clue, but was too tired to speculate any further. I barely got a chance to rest, disturbed by these new findings, when another unannounced disaster occurred. The ground shook beneath me and woke me, causing me to grab my coat and race outside. I was quick to cover my mouth in case there was another explosion from above. But this time, the danger came from the surface. Jacqueline stood alongside me, and we both watched in disbelief as the satellite seemingly pushed itself up from the ground and reverted its trajectory, cascading upwards into the sky. At the same time, debris and sand and rock all flew past us and toward the impact site itself. The heat was blistering, and we both had to cover ourselves to avoid being swept up in the blast that was occurring. It was a complete reversal of the crash itself, the site suddenly looking like an ordinary sand dune, and the satellite mysteriously disappearing back into the sky. We stood there for a long moment, frightened and perplexed by the incident as the others went toward the ground where the satellite had once rested to get a better view. This can't be possible, Farron said. Abby told us all to look toward the sky. We were staring at the moon and watching as it faded from the horizon to reveal a sun rising in the west. Is time going in reverse here? Jacqueline dared to ask. Farron got out his equipment and studied the area as fast as he could. The readings were off the charts, making my heart sink as I realized we were in the heart of a nuclear cloud. Every second we wasted here would destroy our bodies. I barked orders for the survivors to follow me, taking what little we could from camp and rushing beyond the ridge to the east. As we traveled, Farron confirmed that the readings were lessening, and by the time we reached 2 miles from the site, they were gone entirely. Just when we assumed that we were safe, however, the sky above rippled again, and we saw the satellite veering towards the ground. Without hesitation, I screamed for Jacqueline to cover her mouth and hold her breath, leaping under the camel for safety. The noise shook the entire desert, and the animals screamed. This time, we were much closer, and the impact of the crash sent shockwaves across the dunes. As a result, our animals became startled and began to race off towards the east. Absol barked and tried to call them back, but it was too late. We were now without any transportation, miles from any civilization, and stuck in what seemed to be a temporal vortex of some kind. Somehow, despite the immense danger, Jacqueline remained calm and told us all to set up camp here. As the sun set again and time began to flow normally, she told the remaining crew we would attempt to re-enter the zone of interest in the morning. I am both a scientist and a mercenary, but I must disagree with this plan. We move into the radius of the crash, we will simply be exposing ourselves to the bizarre temporal anomaly again, Farron warned. I think he's right. When we were further away, we witnessed it happening. The sickness we have experienced is evidence that it's affecting the entire desert, even in a small way. We get closer, it puts us all at risk, I told her. If my theory is right, the reason we saw the mountain itself move is because of the anomaly. In some distant past, the mountain was there. We stay at the site long enough, it will reappear, she insisted. Her fervor told me that there was more to this mountain than I had previously understood. So even after the others agreed to this fool's errand, I stayed behind to ask her further questions. This has never been about the satellite, am I right? You've been searching for this mountain all along. Why is that? I asked. Jacqueline at first didn't want to respond, but eventually let out a long sigh. We have been monitoring it for about a year now via the satellite, and we determined that it is made of the same material as what we found in the space debris. It's not a mountain at all, Andrew. It's an alien spacecraft, she admitted. I sat down, pondering over the implications. When you were compiling all that data, something must have triggered the anomaly, a failsafe of some kind. The blackout from the satellite was from a signal inside the mountain, I realized. We believe so. We believe there is still active technology aboard the craft, which will push our species forward by centuries. Considering what we have observed with this temporal anomaly, it might even have an impact on our entire understanding of the universe itself, Jacqueline told me. I didn't like it one bit. There was still so much we didn't know, but I could tell she wasn't going to change her mind. Instead, I went along with it and privately spoke to our guide for a plan B. If things go wrong, I need to know that you can find us help, I told Absol. Things have already gone wrong, my friend, but I understand. I will watch the camp and give you 2 days. Should you not return at that time, I will return to the city and send a message to your superiors. It will be up to them to decide what to do next, he told me. That didn't sound very reassuring, but I knew it was the best he could do. Without much else to persuade Jacqueline not to return, we left toward the crash site. Traveling on foot took longer, but allowed Abby and Farron to get better readings of the area. Jacqueline was soon proven correct. The entire landmass of the area was constantly changing, eroding in reverse. By the time we reached the satellite, it was covered. The ground was stabilized, and we set up camp nearby to observe. Abby was the first to show signs of the anomaly affecting her, unable to stop vomiting again. She began to panic. We shouldn't have come back here, she told their leader. Jacqueline didn't know what to do and gave her a sedative, relaxing her friend as we watched the scene play out in front of us. It seemed the longer we stayed near the core of the anomaly, the faster time began to revert around us. Days flew by in mere hours. Soon, we were able to see that the mountain was reforming. Farron kept track of everything, watched over Abby, and watched the mountain build itself back up. What do you think we will find in there? I asked as I offered Abby the last of our supplies to try and keep her strength up. She was already clearly suffering from the spores again. Her breathing was raspy, and her movements stiff. Nothing good, Tag. It was madness to come here. But maybe it was fate. Fate? I repeated. Farron's voice was cold as he revealed how the desert had forced him here. I see it in my dreams. The rising mountain of death. I've seen it for months now. I never fully understood what it meant until now. It was an omen. I was to come here and meet the end of my life. You were too. We all were. They brought us here to witness the rebirth of their evil. He was spitting nonsense, but his eyes were hazed and dull, clearly a sign of mental health issues. I considered telling Jacqueline, but soon found she was already heading toward the mountain. Don't follow her. If you do, the madness will swallow you up, he warned. Behind him, I heard Abby making a gurgling sound, and we both realized she was choking on her own vomit. A moment later, she was dead. I didn't listen to his warnings. We were dying here either way. I needed to determine why. I grabbed my supplies and found the most likely trail she would take. By the next passing of the western sun, I found what looked like the entrance to the tomb. It was clear Jacqueline had entered it. Somehow, despite the fact I knew I could be trapped if I entered, I did anyway. The tomb felt older than any grave I'd ever come across, but still alive. The entire mountain was listening to me as I got deeper toward the core. Before I knew it, I was standing in a room full of carven images of gods that I'd never seen before, not of this earth. Jacqueline was passed out, her wrists slit and blood dripping near an altar in the center of the room. I rushed to her side. The blood was spilled on what looked like an orbital console of some kind. Instinctively, I touched it. The entire room lit up, and I saw holograms of star systems. Voices spoke of the journey these ancient beings had taken to our planet, but all I saw was that their journey had been one of death and destruction. The images showed they had escaped a dying world, but had unwittingly taken the source of their pain with them, a disease that had now infected us. The spores. Slowly, this virus had killed the race that had once housed this place. And before they could even stop their trajectory, they crashed into our world. "Tag?" I heard Jacqueline gasp as she came to. I held her next to me as she struggled to breathe. "You were right. We should have turned around. This was a trap." "Why did you do this? What were you hoping to accomplish?" I asked. As if to answer my questions, a noise came from the other side of the room. A shadowy figure appeared. Absol. He was standing alongside several other men that looked exactly like himself. "You came here because you were meant to come here. The message from the stars, designed to guide you here, was our doing." They all spoke in unison. I looked down at Jacqueline and panicked as I saw the spores were growing inside her mouth. I pushed myself away from her as she gasped for breath, and Absol spoke again. "Centuries ago, we came to this world, slumbered here. Your satellite woke us. It stirred us to bring you from the present to our past. The inevitable result was, we have now infected your species in your future. All the actions we had taken, we had been manipulated so that this prophecy would come true. I realized. Your eyes cast toward the heavens for answers, but the true world we can bring about is right here on this planet," the aliens told me. I grabbed Jacqueline by the arm and hauled her up, hoisting her over my shoulders. They said nothing as we left, and I returned to camp. I'm not sure why it surprised me to find that Farron had slit his throat and died alongside Abby. We were alone. Even though I wasn't sure if Jacqueline could be saved, I carried her toward the edge of the radius. The paradox faded, and we were among the normal desert sands. The Absol we had met was nowhere to be seen. It would be at least a 4-day walk to get back to civilization. I was sure we would burn up by then. Secretly, I hoped we did, so that no one would ever find our infected corpses and spread this disease across our world. Instead, I passed out, and when I awoke, Jacqueline and I were in an army hospital being treated. "We received your distress signal," the nurse told me. I knew it meant that the virus had ensured we would return to the living world. Did that mean people here were already infected? Was it too late, just like they planned? I went to look at the desert sky and where the satellite had fallen. I could see the mountain there, dark and foreboding. It told me the dangerous space virus was now here on Earth and inside me, growing slowly, spreading as soon as it was able. I found myself laughing at the inevitability of our journey together into the sands. The mountain that had intrigued us proved to be our undoing. And now, it would grow and consume and watch us die